My name is Jarie Bolander. Welcome to the Entrepreneur Ethos podcast. On this podcast, we're going to take a deep dive into the traits, values, beliefs, and skills of all sorts of entrepreneurs to learn how to build a more ethical, inclusive, and resilient world. Let's get started. Jodi Lasky, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. You are the CEO of Introvert Founder, which I tell everyone I'm a highly functioning introvert. People do not energize me at all. I fake it really well. I think I told you also before that I use this show to actually practice talking to people, which I think people are like, that's silly, but I need to. So what I want to do is just really dig into the introverted entrepreneur and the founder. I find that a lot of the technical people that I talk to that are founders, that literally, I just want to build the thing. But if you're an entrepreneur and a founder, you're gonna have to talk to people. So yeah, we'll get right into it. But before we do all that, as I always like to say, why don't you tell us how you got to do what you're doing today?
So I was an actual entrepreneur, operational entrepreneur for a lot of years. I had a defense contracting company, and then I had a more traditional or more normal tech startup. And when I started with the tech startup and I moved away from the government side, I started going from DC up to New York fairly frequently to go to startup events, because DC has a lot of great things, but not a great startup community, at least not at that time. And I would go up about once a month for a few days and go to events and talk to the same people at the same events over and over again, and they weren't making progress. And I sort of wound up falling into coaching then. Took a break for the pandemic, shut down my business, did the regular job thing. And about last year, I started getting the itch to start coaching again. And I decided to do it a little more consciously this time and actually lay the framework and have a business name and do it all as an actual business and take it seriously instead of completely like just, running into people and having conversations that turned into coaching sessions. So that's where I am now. And I decided to sort of focus on introverts, because when you read all of the books out there about how to start a business, it's really written from the extroverts standpoint a lot of times. Or you watch TV and the introverts are always the butt of the jokes, right? But we bring a lot of superpowers to startups, to building businesses. We just have to look at it all differently. So that's what I help my clients do.
Wow, a lot to unpack there. Especially coming from an introvert myself, I agree that there's like some super hidden powers to the introverted folk that can sort of sit back and kind of soak it all in and analyze. I think that's the one thing I've found that's been kind of an interesting dynamic between the different co-founders I've had. A lot of them are extroverted and like they're the ones that love getting on the plane and going everywhere. And I'm like, I just want to stay home and, do the work. I think it's fascinating because you have to have a skill set that is complementary. And so I'm wondering if you could kind of go through, you noticed or you said something about the superpowers of introverts. Everyone knows the superpowers of extroverts, but I wonder if you could kind of compare and contrast them, because I think a lot of people miss this, is that the complementary skill set for founders is super important. And it doesn't mean that you're bad or doesn't mean you're good or whatever, but like having a co-founder with complementary skills is just a superpower amplifier in itself.
Yeah, complementary skills and complementary personalities. When you have too much of one thing, you're not covering the rest of the bases. Starting a business, there is a lot to do. And if you both have the same, are clones of the same person, you have one very small niche of stuff you're going to get done. It is perfect for the techie introverted guy to partner with the extroverted sales guy. You get both things covered that way. As introverts, we tend to be very thoughtful, very methodical, and have reasons for doing what we're doing. We also don't deal well with things like small talk, so we jump right in and get to the heart of the matter when other people are still talking about the weather.
Yeah, the chit chat is the bane of my existence.
Yeah. So I
I mean,
always suggest to anyone going to a networking event to ask people what they're excited about. Have that as your opening, because extroverts will take that and run with it. But introverts are like, yes, we're skipping the small talk. I'll tell you what I'm excited about.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, I think one of the other things that's super interesting that I've learned is if you've got hobbies, that even if you have to do small talk, the hobby, depending on how eclectic the hobby is just another opener that's like makes you unique and different. And it's not necessarily, I mean, it's small talk, but it's small talk in something you're interested in, right? So, I do jujitsu. So anytime I know anyone that's like doing that either has done jujitsu or is interested in jujitsu, for me, it's easy to talk about because I do it. And it's not like a weather thing. It's a getting to know you kind of thing.
Right.
Find out a lot about someone by what they do for a hobby. And it's interesting that you mentioned like getting right down to it. Like, let's just get through the warm-up phase and go right to like, let's get stuff done. How do you handle that with some of your clients? I mean, the extrovert kind of needs that warm-up, to be honest. And it's kind of like, warming up when you're exercising. Some people warm up, some people don't. How do you handle that? How do you kind of get them to like understand that that's actually a part of it that they need to do?
Part of it is reminding them that you've chosen to be a leader. I also recommend highly that people take notes on the stuff, not right in front of their employees, but one of our downfalls is we forget to then follow up on stuff that we should when it's in the personal realm. Use technology to remind you. Use your extroverted assistant to remind you. But all of those follow-up things that we're not good at, we still have to do as introverted leaders. But we don't have to like think about it consciously. We can use tech to remind us. I've had people tell me that becomes less authentic. And I'm telling you, when your employee's kid is in the, state championships for baseball, they don't care why you remember to ask. They just care that you remember.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. You bring that up. I mean, I'm notoriously bad at remembering dates and birthdays. So my calendar is filled with these things. And I'm just to make sure that I remember. And it's because for dates, I don't really have a good memory for it. It's like just part of my nature, just a different thing. So I like that. I like the whole idea of trying to make it easier. I mean, there's tools out there for a reason. And I think you're right. I don't think people really care how you remember. They just care that you remember. They cared that you like asked, And so I'm just curious, how do you get introverts to get into that mindset of asking, like being interested, even though they're not?
I have found that you don't actually have to ask. Extroverts will just tell you. And your introverted employees don't really care. Like they're happy to like stay focused on their work, have the work professional discussion. But people who want that will let you know because they'll bring it up. They'll say stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. Now that I think
if you give people a couple of seconds, most people will fill the silence, especially an extrovert and an ambivert. So people aren't like, it's not a 1-0 type of thing. It is a continuum. So we've got the extreme extroverts, the extreme introverts, and in the middle we've got everything, including ambiverts. So they'll sort of let you know, and the more extroverted they are, the more they'll fill the silence, and they'll let you know these things that they want you to be able to check in on them with.
Yeah, I like the idea of questions. I've lacked this skill. I've learned it over time where you just start asking questions. People think you're a great conversationalist, even though you haven't said anything. And for an introvert, that's a superpower, right? Especially if you're generally interested. But even if you're not, I think to your point, have those questions ready, and in the extreme case, you can have them written on a card.
Memorize them. And we're really good at embracing the silence. So just don't ask a question like, how are you? Because everyone responds, I'm fine. Okay, but like, how are you really? Like, what is the key question? And everyone has to figure that out. What is their question that will go beyond the no, we're not taught, we're not going for the, socially acceptable answer. I want to know how things really are.
Yeah, my late wife Jane called it the PR answer. She never liked the PR answer. I mean, my fiance now, she's a little more kind about it. But the PR answer was never the answer that was satisfying enough. Yeah, it's interesting because the dynamics can be so stark. I know my boss now, he likens it to the tortoise and the hare kind of mentality, whereas the introvert's the tortoise that just plugs along, and the extrovert's the hare that's just like literally hair on fire, needing to like absorb and run around and do everything. I'm curious if you use any kind of metaphors, or like, actually I'd love to hear a little bit about your framework and to see how, that kind of how it gets adapted to each kind of person. Because, again, I mean, we all love frameworks. I mean, as introverts, I think, love frameworks more than extroverts because this is what we have to do, or at least engineers do. I'm just curious if you could kind of go over that and like how it gets adapted to each of the ones that each person finds themselves.
So I am an accountability and leadership coach for primarily introverts, and I have a lot of clients with ADHD. Like attracts like. I'm an introvert with ADHD. That tends to be a lot of my clients. But what I developed this year is a framework where I have taken the Agile software development framework and adapted it for building a business faster, more effectively, without sacrificing every other part of your life to do that. So introverts love it because I'm pretty adamant that you work, a 40 or 50-hour work week, whatever you decide, and that's it. You work Monday through Friday and you take weekends basically off. And recharge and deal with the rest of your life and so on. And extroverts can take that same thing and go and do their thing nights and weekends and get their recharging done and remember that you are a total person, not just a founder, not just an entrepreneur.
Yeah. I think a lot of entrepreneurs think that they do have to do the 80-hour weeks. I mean, 8-hour work. In some cases, if you don't know what you're doing, you need to like get up to speed. But I had a great boss, co-founder, colleague, mentor actually as well. He'd always say, if you're working more than 40 hours a week, you're doing something wrong. Like your business is just not, and whatever that number is, but it just means you need more help, or you need to focus more, or you're doing things that aren't productive, right?
Yep.
And I never, because when I was younger, I'd be working 60, 70 hours. To me, come on, you got to work really hard. But as I get older, I realize that the downtime is where the thought, thinking, synthesis, and the integration of ideas comes. I wonder how, if in your experience, and I don't know, like the age range of your clients, if you find a different kind of dynamic from an older versus younger entrepreneur. Any thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, I missed that. The internet connection got a little wonky again. Can you repeat the question?
Oh yeah, sure. Differences in ages, like age group, like young versus old entrepreneur. Any kind of, mostly just like they don't know what they're doing, or how do you adapt it? Tell them to slow it down or speed it up.
I think most entrepreneurs don't really know what they're doing. If this were easy, everyone would do it. I think entrepreneurs of all ages get into that I have to hustle. Like that's the thing, right? If you're not hustling, you're not doing. And that's true across all ages. And what I work with my clients on is realizing marathon, sprint. Which are you doing here? If you're building a business to sustain you, you have to remember that it's a marathon and slow down. I worked with the military for a long time. There's a common saying in the military, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Slow down, you make a lot more progress that way. I think of most entrepreneurs as the reverse ducks. So ducks, they look like they're moving effortlessly, and meanwhile their feet are paddling furiously. Most entrepreneurs look like they're doing a lot, but they're not making any progress.
Reverse duck, like that.
The reverse duck.
And you mentioned that you had a business before you started doing this in contract. Was it, you said defense contracting? Or no, defense contracting.
Defense. I was in defense contracting, and then I had a tech startup before I started coaching.
How's the difference between like the defense and the tech startup? What was the defense contractor in tech, or was it a little bit different? Or
definitely in tech, but the approaches are completely different. Like I thought, I've been doing this for 10 years. I know how to start a business. I know what I'm doing. And I tried to apply any of my 10 years of lessons to my tech startup and had to backtrack and say, okay, never mind. This is something totally new. How do we do it in this sphere?
Interesting. So do you have an engineering background?
I don't. I'm an attorney.
Attorney. Oh, wow. How did you get involved with like laser tag from the military?
I met some really smart people.
Okay. Yeah, because I know I have some buddies that are in the military, but I didn't know. I didn't know what they used to train. But I've heard of this system. Is it there's only like one or two of these systems in the world, right? Is one of them yours?
No, there's a bunch of companies that make similar. I never wound up being able to sell mine to the government, but the technology is called Miles. And I joke that Miles was state of the art in 1979, and so was I. So like this is part of the problem with how we train soldiers today.
Interesting. Yeah. No. Bunch of my buddies that are in, they always have fun stories and frustrations about everything and anything and the bureaucracy and all that. I'm sure it's similar when you're a defense contractor, right?
Absolutely. And that's what I was used to, and looking for ways around the bureaucracy and how to play all those games. And then the tech world is a totally different set of rules, a totally different set of games. Like in defense, certain things happen on a yearly cycle. Other things happen on like a 3-year cycle. You just sort of know it's going to be long and slow. And in the tech world, that can be anywhere from, a week to 3 weeks to 3 years. And it's not, there aren't laws that say you only get to do these things once a year. So it happens whenever. Chaotic. Yeah. Tech sector is chaotic.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's the whole thing when entrepreneurs get into something, that they got to understand the sales cycle, development cycle. And just because you want to go fast doesn't mean the market goes fast. And
and just because you want to be slow and thoughtful about something doesn't mean the market will allow that either.
That is also true. You got to run at the speed of the market. You can't really run at your own pace. That's part of the reason, you see all these startups that have just been dumped full of money in these last couple of years that have kind of faltered. They weren't really building for longevity or building for profitability. They were building to keep up because, the gamble, like everyone thinks, is that you're the last company standing. Therefore, you get the majority of the category. Therefore, you get the majority of the money and get the big exit. And I don't know. I just find that, I wonder if introverts have a different kind of thought on like the failure part of it. Like it is, because for me, I internalize it more. For my extrovert friends, they're just like, it's just part of the game. And I, for whatever reason, have to learn. Do you find that the internalizations, like, because you mentioned introverts are a little more thoughtful, a little more methodical. I'm wondering if you have to
We
deal
tend
with
to
that.
be in our heads a lot more.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Yep. If our businesses don't make it, we take it personally as opposed to, okay, but like single digit of companies will succeed. Or, they don't raise the funds they needed to in the current round. All right. But like most companies are never funded. So what are you going to do instead? But yeah, we take things a lot more personally because we put more of ourselves into it.
That's a good point. Yeah, because I've always struggled with this. I've been at, I don't know, 6, 7 startups. Some of them have been okay. I still got to work. It's not like I got the big exit. But
Yet.
the ones that failed felt more personal. And how do you coach someone through that? I mean, that's a pretty big, I would think, a pretty big problem.
Well, and I went through it myself. So that makes it a little bit, I wouldn't say easier, but I can empathize a lot more. I understand the process. I understand the embarrassment and the anger and the frustration over having to apply for a job, having to take a normal, having to work for someone else again. In my case, I took a job that I sort of didn't really, I don't want to say I didn't care about it, at least not in a podcast that other people might hear, but I have a position now where if I succeed, great. If I don't, I know the people who got it instead of me will do basically the same exact job. And so it's not something that at the end of the day I take emotionally. And I needed that when my startup failed. I needed to do work that gave me the steady income and the good health insurance and a 40-hour week job that was just a job. And it worked out really well for a number of years because that's what I needed to recover. And it did take several years to recover.
Yeah. Yeah. That recovery time, I've felt that before. I have a friend who calls it monk mode. You just go into monk mode and do what you got to do. It's funny because I'm not the same problem. Unmanageable mostly. Even that, I'm an introvert. Kind of unmanageable. It's just hard for me to have a boss. I'm learning a lot more to be a little more calm about it. I think that's the problem I always had, was that I always had this altruistic view, or like, of course I'm doing the right thing. What do I have to tell you? Like, come on, like, just, it's a trust thing, I think. And I think, again, because introverts are a lot more thoughtful, I think that kind of comes into the credibility and the trust. Like, well, it's just me. Like, I'm doing the right thing. I'm just like, some people, they just don't trust people.
Well, managers get to sort of choose, but you have to choose. You either make the decision that you're going to trust everyone until they show you they can't be trusted, or you're going to trust no one until they prove they can be. And some of us, you, me, we need the kind that is going to trust us to be the professionals that we are, do our jobs, and if we lose trust, then we deserve it. But earning trust is hard. Earning trust takes time. And at the beginning of a job, when you're already maybe a little nervous, trepidatious, whatever brought you there, it's not always, especially if you were an entrepreneur and you're not really necessarily happy about having to take any job, to then have to do all that work to build trust and build rapport is exhausting.
Yeah, that, I had never thought of it that way. It's the exhaustion of doing all that work that most extroverts like love. I never thought of it that way. That the exhaustion of building trust for someone that inherently either is thoughtful or trustworthy, or assumes other people are trustworthy. I think that's probably one of the traps introverts get into, is they're too trusting. Do you find that as well? That there's too much of a trusting thing?
I don't think that's an introvert extrovert thing. I think people just fall into the one of the two buckets, trust everyone or trust no one.
Yeah. But for an introvert that's trusting, it's harder because you have to put in the effort and time and brain energy that you normally wouldn't want to spend.
Right.
Kinda
Well,
wanna do.
and for an introvert who's not trusting, they're always on guard. So
Yeah.
that's going to exhaust them also.
Yeah.
So either way, just people are exhausting for us.
Yeah. Do you think that gets better over time? Is there like a way that introverts, especially introverted founders, I mean, you're a founder, you're going to have to be out there talking to people. I mean, I'm sorry, that's just life. If you're the founder, people are going to want to talk with you, especially if they're going to give you money, they're going to want to see your face. Like, sorry, it's not.
That's
I wish I
just
wasn't.
how it is. The key is to be thoughtful about the opportunities. So with in-person events, making sure that there is really a reason to go to it as opposed to the hustle. Like everyone says, you have to go to all these events. So you go to them and then you're too tired to actually work on your business. No, know why you're going to an event. In terms of phone calls and meetings and all of that, minimize the points of contact. And by that, I mean, make them count, but also don't use Zoom if a phone call will work. Don't have a phone call if an email will work. Like, don't give your energy away unless you know that there's a reason for it.
Huh. So you really have to manage your energy, or
Absolutely.
your yeah. I guess when it comes, like, what's interesting when it comes to creativity, I always have this analogy where I wake up in the morning with a bucket of creativity, and when the bucket's empty, I'm done. Like, no more creativity. Like, I'm gonna have to take a walk, or like, it's not gonna be my best work, right? I wonder if that analogy holds true for this, or do you use it different?
I haven't used that one, but I definitely can say it applies to me. I write vampire novels because it amuses me.
Oh, you're a
And
writer.
so
Awesome.
I get up at 5 a.m. so that I can journal and work on my novels and have the most amount of my creative brain space for that before I start my day job. And I do that because the creativity runs out and my day job involves writing, and it involves a very technical form of writing that will suck the creativity out of you. So I start the day giving my most focused creativity to stuff that's for me. I'm not a morning person. I hate mornings. I would only see 5 a.m. if it were at the end of the night instead of the beginning of the day. If it were up to me, I have a friend who has a theory that I write vampire novels because I am a vampire. I'm not, I promise. But this is what I have had to do to have the energy and the creative brain space for the projects that matter to me. It's 5 a.m. No one else is awake. No one else is intruding on my time. I get to be creative without anyone else around. I mean, even my dog gets half the time will just sort of look at me like, yeah, you have fun. I'm staying in bed.
Yeah. Wow, it's so fascinating. How many novels have you written so far? 3. Awesome. And you just like the vampire genre just because?
Only one. Yeah. Well, only 2 of them are vampire novels. I've played with some other stuff also, but
all right.
None of them are out yet. I'm still trying to decide if I'm going to self-publish or traditional publish. But yeah.
Okay. So 3 completed novels that are sort of still under wraps, still trying to figure out if the world should see them.
Exactly.
And what's the genre other than vampire? Is it what's the sort of the
women's
synopsis?
Fiction?
Women's.
My main vampire book is called Bite the Patriarchy.
Love it. Okay, so women's empowerment vampire fiction. Would that be?
Yep.
Pretty close.
Pretty close.
As a fellow author, I've written and published 8 books.
Oh wow.
Yeah, the latest one is a memoir about my late wife Jane, who died of leukemia. Interesting. That's how I met Barbara a couple of weeks.
That's what she said.
Yeah, Jane died. I did a live webinar, and she was just shocked. What are you doing here? And I go, what else am I going to do? I'm going to sit at home. Apparently that's brave to do, but which, I found, I don't know if this is the case with you, that the writing just such a great release to get the things rattling around in your head, in a tangible form. It's just therapeutic for some reason. I don't know if you feel the same way.
It is. And that's certainly part of the introversion in us. Extroverts may talk to a good friend about those things, but for us, it's pen to paper, fingers to keyboard, whichever, to get those thoughts and emotions out.
Yeah, I've only written one fiction book. It was actually a chapter book under a pen name, which I won't get into. That's the only one. It was fun.
Now I feel the need to try to hunt it down. But
okay. Yeah. You'll never in a billion years find it, right? Because it's the whole thing. But it was a historical fantasy, I guess. And what was fun is my fiance has a daughter, so I wrote it with her, which was really cool. To just kind of be, but it's the first. I had that one that's published under a pen name, and then there's another one that I did that I never published. I did. Are you familiar with NaNoWriMo? You heard of NaNoWriMo? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Grant Faulkner actually was the first guest on this podcast. That's how much I love NaNoWriMo and Grant. Grant actually also interviewed me for my book launch, which was really fun. Just he's such a great guy. And yeah, it's sort of I did a novel for them, which was a fictional one. It was just fun. It's just get the anger out. I mean, is it the synthesis of your life experience and you put it on the page, like you said, to work through it, as opposed to some people would write nonfiction to do that. You just sort of I'm just fascinated why fiction as opposed to nonfiction.
This is gonna make me sound nuts. I apologize now. The fiction is because I have a character in my head who's telling me that stuff, and I have to get it out of my head so she'll stop talking quite so loud some of the time.
That's the muse, and I have that same thing is in my head. So
just sounds a little crazy. I am about to embark on a memoir, helping a friend with her memoir.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful.
So that will be new. I guess I can't do that for Nano though, since NaNoWriMo is National Novel Writing Month.
I updated my memoir during NaNoWriMo. I'm pretty sure Grant, who I know personally and I am going to vouch for, will say that is okay as long as you are writing something.
Okay.
Write something.
I will definitely be writing something.
Yeah, memoir. My publisher, Spark Press, who also publishes an imprint called She Writes Press, which is all about female author empowerment. Brooke Warner's the publisher, who's a fantastic person. And a genuine, when an editor just gets you, that you just hold on to those people because, as a writer, I could give my stuff to people and they'll be like, yeah, I'll read it. But it's not they don't feel it, And,
no, you need your writing community. That's we are very sensitive creatures that need people around us who will read our stuff and not tell us how wonderful we are. I mean, tell us how wonderful the books are if they really are, but also support us in the moments where, it's not as good as it can be and where it needs to go next.
Yeah. I remember the first time I met Brooke through Grant, by the way, which is great. And I remember I gave her, I had done a draft of it and I had done something called the Story Grid. I don't know if you're familiar with Story Grid.
I've heard of it. I haven't used it.
I was a certified Story Grid editor for a while. I thought I was going to do that. So I had a bunch of my Story Grid buddies read it, like Leslie Watts, who's now I think she's the publisher. I don't remember her exact title. I think she actually publishes books through them right now. So she was my first editor, and we were story nerds, and so the whole thing is structurally just sound, it's the framework, right? And so I sent it to Brooke, who's a memoir expert, no one probably better in the world, I would think. I mean, there's probably some, but she's probably a handful are as good as she is, right? and because she's done so many. And I was so nervous because like, I'm paying you to read this and help me make it better. And you're a pro, and like people know who you are. And I just remember send it to her, and I get an email back with this, the summary. Like, people that don't know this, when you send a manuscript into an editor, they do like a structural edit, or they'll give you a memo. It's like, this is what all the things you need to do, right? And I just remember the first line. She's like, Jarie, well, you can write. And I'm like, thank God. And then it was, period. And here's a few things you need to work on in your book. And it was like, right? But it's all right. I mean, I think 98% of what she said, I did. I could just tell me what to do. That's
Right.
so powerful.
Yeah,
And I think for entrepreneurs, I think that's the role, that mentor, that coach, that does. So it's similar. And entrepreneurship and authorship are sort of, they're running a parallel line, I think.
They're both creative endeavors. It's a matter of how the creativity comes out of us. Is it building a business, or is it building a world?
Yeah, Joanna Penn calls it the authorpreneur. She even wrote a book about that. Again, it's kind of cool. I got to interview her too at some point. All these author things, and no one in entrepreneurship even knows.
No, well, and most entrepreneurs would say, why would authors need to care about all that? And then, you become an author. Like, I went from entrepreneurship to writing novels, and realized just how much of the building of all of it, and the publicizing and all that all falls on the author.
Yeah, you got to
until you're huge.
Yeah,
it's all done by the author.
Yeah, I'm like, when's that ever going to happen? Everyone's like, oh, did you like the book? My memoir, Ride or Die, came out 2 weeks ago. I was talking to someone. They're like, oh, how's the sales going? Do you know how much you've made yet? I'm like, one, it's going to be another 6 months before I even know. And two, you don't get rich on being a writer, right? That's just, you do it for the love. You have to at a certain point, until you're like Joanna Penn or, Stephen Pressfield.
A friend of mine just got a 7-figure deal, and I am so through the moon for her. Like, she's been writing for about 3 years, and
wow,
her books are fantastic. And
great. That's so great.
It also was a reminder that she was an engineer, in fact, and decided to become a full-time writer, novelist. It can happen.
Yeah, it's like building a business, like an entrepreneur. I mean, it is a business. Like, don't make no mistake about it. Parallels are strikingly similar. And I always say that, entrepreneurs are the creatives of the business world. I mean, we build something from nothing. Authors build something from nothing. The voice in your head, the voice in my head, this rattling around, the creative muse, the thing we tap into, the whatever you call it, the other plane of consciousness, which people think is a little woo-woo, but you're like, no, like, I'm not kidding when I say there's something. I don't know what.
Until the voice starts talking to you, you don't get it.
Yeah. I mean, when I was writing the memoir, that voice was my late wife, Jane, right? Every muse is different. I mean, there's the cosmic muse that as the artist you tap into. And then there's the muse on each individual book. And depending on the character, Jane, obviously she was a real person. So in my mind, as I'm writing this, all I'm hearing is like, you sure you want to say that? That's not the way it happened. Don't make me look bad. You're like, oh.
Let me get the first draft done.
Yeah.
And let me get the first draft done. Then you can edit it.
Yeah. Then you can be meticulous and menacing and absolute, like, cold, hardcore editor. But, you can be, you can beat me up all you want, but I need to get this out on the page. I think that was the most important thing I realized about being an author.
Yep.
Just get it down, man. Just get it down.
Yeah. My first NaNoWriMo, I was like, oh my God, 50,000 words in a month. How does one do that? And my second NaNoWriMo was when I wrote my novel, my vampire novel, and I did 84,000 words in the month, because it just
crazy, huh?
wasn't going to stop. So
Yeah. And
yeah.
yeah, I think when I first did it, when I did that one novel, I think it was like, 58,000 maybe.
Mhm.
I mean, is there such thing as writer's block, or is it just, no, you're just procrastinating? What do you
I think the muse absolutely gets mad at us.
think?
I was I'm working with a fantastic editor right now to try to get my Elizabeth, my vampire's name is Elizabeth, to get her story to the next level so that I can shop it around. And like, she just was not talking to me at all. I was working on stuff and I realized it's because of how we phrased something that I was, books, especially women's fiction, they're all about the emotional wounds and what you're healing from and yada yada. And I had something like her wound, we had the word trauma in it, and she was mad. She would not talk to me until I was like, okay, let's come up with a new way of phrasing it. What are you okay with? But yeah, for like months, I didn't have her voice in my head. And I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to write another word because she's not speaking to me. Like, and no other characters are coming through. And what am I going to do?
Yeah.
We
I mean, I think
worked
it's
through it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's similar for entrepreneurs too. They may not call it the voice in their head, but there's something that's driving them to go. Like, there's some muse. They just don't call it the muse because they're not very, artsy like writers.
Well, and it's that idea that takes hold and won't let go.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we hold on to bad business ideas because we're afraid there won't be another one.
Yes.
We keep working on manuscripts that we should let go because we're afraid there won't be another one. But when you can put it to the side, you then make the brain space for the next idea.
Jodi, that's the perfect place to end. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for sharing your journey.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Entrepreneur Ethos podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did creating it. My hope is that you learned something that can make you a little bit better. If you enjoyed the podcast, please do share it with friends and review it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can also join my email list by visiting theentrepreneurethos.com to get my thoughts on what I'm doing to get better, as well as what I'm working on. You can also pick up my book, The Entrepreneur Ethos, if you want to learn the traits, values, and beliefs that I think we need to build a more ethical, inclusive, and resilient entrepreneur and, frankly, world community. Feel free to follow me on Twitter @TheDailyMBA and let me know if you have any questions or recommendations for a guest you'd like me to talk to. Also, drop me a note if you try anything we talked about on this or any other episode. I'd love to hear what's working for you. Until next time, keep getting better.